Welcome, everyone. Hi, I'm Kathleen Bostick. I'm head of marketing at DataMundi. DataMundi is a human AI data solutions company, and we provide a complete suite of data and language services. I'm delighted to have you here today for our third webinar in our series with Bruno Herman. Some of you may have already attended our first one, which was What Human Supervision Means in the Age of Gen AI. Then we had a second one, operationalizing Gen AI to create business value in multilingual content and product management. And so in line with that, we've got our third webinar today, and it's a little bit more on the technical side, infusing AI into your product and content management ecosystem. I think you'll find it really interesting. Bruno will explain to you what this means and how you can start the process in your own companies. So before we go there, I just wanted to introduce Bruno very quickly. Many of you know him. I've known Bruno for many years. He's a respected voice in the global content and language industry. He's very popular right now, speaking at a number of keynote places, and his demand for companies looking for him to help them operationalize their Gen AI. A lot of words there. So anyway, before we kick it off, the webinar is being recorded, so you automatically receive the recording. Attendees are on mute, off camera. We'll be about 40 minutes or so, and then we'll have 10 minutes for Q&A. If you want to use the Q&A box, not the chat, for questions, we'll take those at the end. And we'll also be taking a few interactive polls and so if you respond to those polls, you'll be able to see the answers there. So with that, Bruno, I am going to turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Kathleen, and good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are. It's a pleasure for me actually to start this short dive into indeed the more technical aspect of generative AI in the business. So it's called Infusing AI in Your Ecosystem for Global Content Product Management. And indeed, I think that you're going to hear two words from me very frequently today, which is infuse and ecosystem. There is a reason for that, and I will explain why I'm using these words specifically to talk about, the technical aspect or the technology that is used to, leverage, capabilities within the business. But I think that before moving to the agenda, we have a first poll that we can show now, I believe. And the first poll is going to be, yeah, don't see it yet. Yeah, there we go. It's going to be about, the ecosystem itself. So the question is, how unified, centrally managed is your technology ecosystem? And this is, when I said technology ecosystem, I mean, everything that is composing your environment, your technology environment. So the systems, the tools, the platforms. So the choice is between not unified at all, partially unified, almost unified, fully unified, or, you don't know. And I think it's a very relevant question because there is at least one ecosystem in every company. It might be small, it might be complex, it might be fragmented, it might be unified, but there is no company today that can survive without an ecosystem. An ecosystem can be made only of, for instance, a CRM and a CMS, or it can be made of dozens of different components. And the result is that, okay, not unified at all, 17%. That's better than I expected because in my reality, in my business life, I see more cases when there is no unification at all. Partially unified, 33%, almost unified, 17%, and fully unified, 17%. That is, and of course, 17% for I don't know. So that's very interesting for me for the rest of this short dive, because to be honest with you, I come across a number of people and organizations that don't have any sort of decent unification. The ecosystem is little bit, all over the place. There are tools everywhere. There are platforms also a bit everywhere. So that's going to be a very interesting, perspective for the rest of this presentation. So if we move to the next slide. So today, as I said, I'm going to use the word infuse a lot. But what does it mean, actually, when I say infusing AI? It means, first of all, finding and reaching the sweet spot. Many people are using the word or the expression sweet spot. But for me, the sweet spot is intelligent automation, which is the balance between human intelligence and machine intelligence. So that's what, in my view, in my experience, intelligent automation is all about. It also means considering a breed approach. This is very important, actually, to be realistic, because there are few organizations, to my knowledge, that can really say, I can do everything on my own. Typically, people have, or organizations have to partner with, other people, other teams, internally or externally, to actually build and maintain an ecosystem. So that's what I call the best of breed. It also means evaluating and balancing build, buy, and partner strategically and tactically. This is a question that I get all the time. Can you recommend one way to go when it comes to, building and maintaining the ecosystem? Should we do it all in-house? Should we do it, with a partner? Should we actually buy something directly? And it's a very important question because of course, it's not very technical as such, but the answer to that question, so what's going to be the balance between build, buy, and partner, is going to determine how technology is going to be used eventually in the environment, in the ecosystem. Of course, it means training AI with relevant, accurate, and trustworthy data. This is, of course, the starting point. Data is the lifeblood of generative AI. And of course, if there is no good data, there is no good generative AI, and there is no good outcome anyway. And finally, it implies leaning into business processes for content and product management. That's a message I keep nailing, for the reason that, of course, the best tech ecosystem would be useless if they do not create value for product management or for content management. So it is a way to say that tech ecosystems must be put into perspective and practice for the business and not just for the sake of technology. So if we move to the next slide. Yeah, that's about me. You know me. Kathleen did a great job to introduce me. I'm not a newbie, and of course, I'm very passionate about language technology as a whole. And obviously, if you need to know more about what I've done, you can still go to my LinkedIn profile. On the next slide, this is, of course, the big picture. When we look at what is strategically important to implement for AI and for generative AI specifically, it's, first of all, it's about people, processes, and technology. And of course, the outcome has to be on the client side. So technology is, first of all, that infusing AI is necessary to update and to upgrade workflows. I'll get back to that in a minute. It also means that it's about, obviously, capturing and converting assets into language data. Language data, as I said, is the lifeblood of any AI augmented platform or ecosystem today, so this is critical. Also, it means that the infusing AI in ecosystems has to be focused on managing data according to different domains. You cannot just say, yes, I'm going to feed my ecosystem with great data. Yes, of course, this data has to be great, but it has to be more than just great. It has to be specific. It has to be domain-driven, as I say, and I will use an example in one of my use cases a bit later on. Also, it means integrating data and content services. I think DATAmundi is the best place to say that, because obviously it is critical not just to say that, data is available, but there has to be a number of services that must be integrated into the ecosystem. In some places, but not everywhere. So that's why infusing is so important, because infusing doesn't mean sort of rushing to the ecosystem and trying to, put generative AI in different blocks, as I will show in a minute. It has to be a bit more sensible and a bit more data driven than that. So hence the importance of data services. Also, it has to be coupled with the enhancement of integrated data and content services. So if there are already some data services available, these services have to be, I would say, calibrated. They have to be enhanced in general to be able to be useful, to be valuable for generative AI. So it's not because great data is available that it's going to be immediately relevant for generative AI. And finally, the analysis of language data flows is critical because language experts today are really the sort of the stars of many ecosystems. Many people go to the data specialist experts and they ask for some advice, or they ask for data, but of course, there is a whole analysis framework that needs to be put in place for technology. So that is the whole picture. And you see again that it has to be the ecosystem, the tech ecosystem has to be combined with people, processes to actually deliver the value to clients. Because at the end of the day, it's all a matter of people. It starts with people and it ends with people. Of course, people responsible for generative AI and people who are on the client side expecting the outcome. If we go to the next slide, this is a sort of example of, I wouldn't say complex, but certainly elaborated or a bit more advanced ecosystem. I've seen this sort of ecosystem in many organizations where I've been working. Of course, the ecosystem is made, of different components, as I said, but these components have a certain purpose. It has to be related to creation of content. It has to be related to making content multilingual. It has to be related to the business processes in general. And of course, it has to be also connected with data and content services. So this is just an example. I use that example because it's not too complex, but it's not too simple either to explain that if we are considering generative AI and what generative AI can do, so not just generate content, but translate content, post-edit content, etc., we see that, of course, there is a sort of infusion that can go to the various components, not to all these components, and that's why infusing is important again. Generative AI is not going to replace these components. It's going to be used in conjunctions with those components. So it's not to say that tomorrow generative AI is going to replace my CMS, it's going to replace my TMS, it's going to replace my vendor management tool. For the moment, at least, I cannot predict what's going to happen in the future, but for the moment, it's really clear that generative AI is going to work in conjunction, I would say in valuable conjunction with other components, and that's the challenge. That's why infusing is difficult, because it cannot be just sort of a straight line. It has to be determined, it has to be phased, it has to be proven to be really useful. And that's really where, of course, the infusion of AI makes some people sometimes a bit crazy, because many people would like to rush and say, well, generative AI is going to replace some of these components, because why should we still need some tools like that? And the answer is you still need those components of ecosystems, because generative AI will act as another layer or as a companion for these components, but not as a substitute, not as a replacement. So I think we can go to the next slide. And this is, of course, the infusion that I was talking about. Yep. So for this short dive, I wanted to use two business cases or use cases that I personally was involved in. The first one is this is, of course, a slide which is typically used by people like me using or following the Lean Six Sigma methodology to work and to deliver projects. The first one is about infusing agents. In this case, I know that obviously many people talk about agents today because they see some value in agents, with AI being more active, not just reactive, but proactive, executing. So I think it was good for me just to use one use case related to those agents. And the reason why I wanted to use that slide is because it has to be first, from a high level perspective, it has to be framed properly. What is the problem that, or the problems that agents are going to solve? It's important to know why we are implementing agents. And that's, of course, a mistake that some organizations made. Not in this case, because we worked with this marketing agency from the outset, but some organizations are just rushing to agents, and they believe that creating agents is going to create value immediately, which unfortunately it's not the case. It's not the case in many instances. So that's why it's important to really describe the problem which has to be solved, and of course to scope and to define what's going to be the impact of, in this case, infusing agents. So fortunately, we were able, when I say we, it's me and my business partner, we were able to work with the different stakeholders. It's a pan-European marketing agency, so it's not multinational, but it's not a small business either. It's really one of these, I would say, at least in Europe, one of these mid-sized businesses. And I think it was really interesting to go through this exercise because we were talking to the CTO, the CIO, and a bunch of other stakeholders. And obviously, as usual, when you have a mix of roles in a room like that, you have some people who are just focused on technology, and then you have people who are more focused on the business outcome. And I think the objective of this discussion, which is summarized here on this slide, was actually to get the balance right between what should be done from a tech ecosystem perspective versus the expected outcome and the expected value. So that is why I wanted to use that slide as a sort of introduction to the use case. So now, talking about the use case itself, that company went through an evolution or a transformation, I should say, which is not unusual in many other companies, which is starting from a fairly manual, workflow or supply chain. So the ecosystem in that case is made of components that are, typically used by human beings for manual tasks. So that's why in this case it was a combination of CMS and TMS, and that of course was working well. But with AI, the game was definitely changed. So moving from the initial workflow to the AI augmented workflow, this is when the company decided to infuse AI, generative AI, in a number of phases: the creation of content, the validation of content, the localization of content, the quality estimation, evaluation of content, etc. So that's why you see in purple these phases where the ecosystem was infused with generative AI, because there was an added value to actually work or infuse language models to accelerate or to improve those phases. So it was a matter of speed or a matter of savings sometimes. And at the end of the day, it was most of all a matter of customer experience, because when you are in a marketing agency, you really depend a lot on what your customers are going to say and do. And then this is where we jumped in, in the latest, probably there will be more than that, but so far it's the most recent phase of this transformation, which is about AI augmentation with agents this time. And that's why you can see now in red the steps or the phases where agents have been infused, have been implemented. And the reasons why these agents were chosen and of course were also trained, the reason was of course to add value to each of these steps. So that's why, for instance, from a creation perspective, agents were designed to prompt automation, sorry, to automate prompt, to automate prompting, to actually automate quality estimation, to automate transaction between different people who were involved in creation. In the past, there were project managers who were actually saying that they were overwhelmed because they had to contact many people, they had to contact to coordinate many people, and of course that's where agents can really replace and do this type of work, coordination, transaction, because then of course project managers can focus on more value adding tasks. So that is one sort of example, and of course also in terms of localization, because I suspect that there are quite a bunch of people in the audience today who are involved in multilingual content. Again, these agents were used to plan and execute localization, so that again, project managers didn't have to push on buttons to have something done, and also that reviewers didn't have to be going through different systems or different I would say interfaces, platforms. That's the word I was looking for. And of course, agents can then execute localization. And when I say execute localization, I mean planning localization, coordinating localization, and review of localization, and also again transfer the I would say the result, the outcome of localization to the people who are at the end of the chain, who are typically the well the validator the validators, the people who have to sign off specifically. So for content production and for content multilingual content management, there was a definitely valuable approach to create those agents and to infuse those agents. And again, you see that at the end of the day, the CMS is still used with external clients because, of course, for the moment, external clients still need to go through their client portal, which is managed by a CMS. Language models are still important because, of course, if you don't have language models to execute some of these tasks, but of course, agents are really acting as an in-between layer between the project managers and the clients, the stakeholders, and all the people performing tasks. And by the way, the agency decided to go beyond just a tech ecosystem update. They also changed the roles, and their project managers are now called traffic managers. And I really like this word. I think that a number of project managers, when they will start using agents, they will become, of course, coordinators. That's what I saw many times. But they will become traffic managers because they will have to manage traffic. Traffic that's going to be, of course, first controlled and coordinated by agents. But at the end of the day, you need some level of human supervision to make sure that what is in the traffic, what goes out of the traffic, is going to be relevant, valuable, as I said before. So this is an example of why a tech ecosystem, an AI infused tech ecosystem can also, of course, lead to some new roles or some I would say some transformed roles. And I think that was a great idea. I think I'm going to reuse that term, traffic managers, in the future. But this is the picture. You see the evolution from something quite manual or very manual, but going to something or a workflow that is AI augmented with agents. And you see that it's never about replacing components. Most of the time, it's about using agents in conjunction with those systems and those tools. Of course, sometimes they replace tasks that project managers used to do, but that's a good thing because what is the added value of pushing buttons? So this is an example for me, a good example. And I don't say that because I worked on that, but I've seen other examples like that in other companies where indeed the use of agents, which is the sort of the most popular AI direction now, because of course there is a reason for that. It's really critical to use agents to maximize the use of AI. But obviously, it has to be done in a way that is immediately or quickly, at least, generating value. And of course, that is also keeping the value from other components when it is necessary. So at this point in time, of course, some agents can replace some components, but the reality, at least the reality that I see, is that it's more like agents and other components, more than just agents or other components. So there is not this logic of replacing and removing that should be immediately considered. So we can go to the next slide. And just to one of the slides that we had to create to present the outcome to the management of this marketing agency was to yes, AI was infused in the ecosystem, but okay, what is the impact? What is the reason behind this project? Because obviously we said in the beginning that agents were going to save time, were going to save some cost, that they were going to enhance the customer experience. Okay, but nobody was taking our words for granted. So that's why in the final presentation we wanted to, because of course stakeholders, they need something simple. They don't like to see Excel files all the time. But we said, okay, how we are going to position that in terms of value creation versus effort, which is in this case human supervision. What is the balance in the ecosystem between this upgrade with agents and the impact or the result, the value for human traffic managers, as I call them now. And we see, of course, that there are different I would say, types of outcome. In any case, the impact was high. So there was no low impact agent. That's good news, of course, because otherwise the project would have been a failure. But then, when you say that, yes, my agents are creating a lot of value, you have to put that in perspective with what is still required from a human perspective, from a human supervision perspective. And that, of course, when some agents are indeed highly valuable and they don't require so much effort. They are usually typically related to transactioning, billing, as I said in an example here, planning agents. These agents don't need a lot, well, at least in the best case, they don't need a lot, so much training. But of course, when it comes to agents that are estimating and rating quality, then of course it becomes something more sensitive. Not to say that billing agents are not sensitive, but obviously when you trust an agent to start estimating and rating the quality or the effectiveness of content in Spanish or in German, etc., you need, of course, to make sure that these agents have been trained and they are, of course, leveraging AI with the right data. This is, of course, when we come back to data, language data from the outset, which is, of course, very important, not just to have the right data, but to make sure that the right data are used to train the right agents so that there is no mistake. Because if there is indeed some sort of delegation of quality estimation or quality rating to agents, the least we have to do, and we say we, it's everybody, clients, suppliers, is actually to make sure that these agents are trained in the way that are going to be trusted. So that is again why eventually we come back to the discussion about language data. But okay, so that's a very interesting case that I wanted to raise here, because then this is a typical case where you understand, you see the meaning of the word infusing. Infuse is not just implementing, replacing, whatever. It is a balance. It is a balance between implementation, adoption, value creation, and different factors. So we can go to the next slide. Another case, this time, different organization, different purpose as well. And in this case, the challenge was quite complex because the challenge or the project that we had to deal with had different facets. The overall objective was to define the effectiveness of prompting and the selection of language models. Having said that, this is quite easy to say, but it's more difficult to implement. How can you and how could we capture the effectiveness of prompting practices and also the selecting practices of language models? So in this case, the context was also a little bit different because obviously there was a clear target, which was to acquire, is actually to use two language models, but also to be able to use those models in the best possible way. And of course, when we look at the ecosystem, you might say, yes, obviously, there is the component for, excuse me, the component for content creation, where you see that, large language models are replacing, potentially they're replacing some other creation tool, other creation tools. Yes, but how can you make sure that language models are indeed producing this expected outcome? And this was, again, the scope and the impact that were required for this project. So moving to the next slide, we started, guess what, with data. And that was a bit of a surprise for some people, because they were expecting me and my business partner to go directly to the language models. And we said, oh, wait a minute. Before talking about the models themselves and how prompting is going to be managed, let's look at what is upstream, and it's data. That's where it starts. And then we did something that I personally believe in, which was to make data science and language expertise work together. Because in many companies, well, many, I shouldn't say that, but in a number of companies probably, when it comes to language data, the ownership is given immediately to IT. So it's the CTO, the CIO who are owning data, of course, but also language data. But of course, language data has this dimension of, linguistic effectiveness. So even if there are some good, experienced data scientists who are multilingual, that doesn't make them, language experts. They are data experts, but they are not language experts. Same thing for language experts. There might be, of course, they are experts in their field, but even if they know how to manage data, they are not specifically data experts. So that's why we bundled, or we combined those two groups of people, which was a surprise for that company, because their data science was a little bit like, in a kingdom, if I can use that term. And of course, it was quite logical, because of course, data science has always been the primary owner and the primary manager of data in general. But in this case, we're talking about language data, which is more than data as some people know it. So that is one thing. And then we decided to look at what is data for AI, what should be done actually to create that data, and use, of course, a number of criteria, indicators, because these criteria will become indicators at the end of the project, related to correctness, relevance, trustworthiness, and accuracy. And of course, that was necessary because all the other outcomes from the ecosystem, all the other outcomes which are training the models, prompting, generating content, all these outcomes are depending on, as I said, the foundation, which is language data. So that's why we started with that, specifically on the combination, or on the I would say the partnership between the IT organization and the marketing product management organization, because that's where language experts were. But at the end of the day, that sort of partnership, or that sort of collaboration was necessary to make sure that the baseline was good enough. Because I know that obviously, our task was to determine who was who, and I say who, which group of people uh, was most appropriate or most experienced in or most effective in prompting practices. And that's where, of course, if we go to the next slide, that's where I wasn't surprised by the outcome of this test, of this, I would say, experiment. But many people around me were surprised because when we looked at, of course, the ecosystem was already in place. So there were language models already defined, predefined, pre-selected, two large models, two small models, but we had to set up a testing framework. And obviously, for many people, when you say, let's test our ecosystem to see how our AI, or how our AI, generative AI components are working, they would say immediately, let's do a test, let's try to create a piece of content, or let's try to summarize some content, in English or another language, and we'll see how it goes. We decided to be a bit more sophisticated than that, and to set up a testing framework that was made of course, human beings, because at the end of the day, it's the human teams that were using the models, that were going to use the models along the way, but also to mix the groups of people based on their experience, based on their, of course, based on their own fluency level in languages, so native speakers or bilinguals, just bilinguals. So just to have a mix of people, a mix of human beings who would be, of course, using the models in the ecosystem. And that's, of course, where the result was surprising for some people, but not to me, not for me, because I went through a similar test 2 years ago with another organization, and I bet that linguists would be slightly better, or language experts, not just linguists. So people who have language expertise. There might be terminologists, there might be linguists, they might be even project managers. Why not? But I was always betting 2 years ago that these people would be slightly better users of models because they would be better at prompting. Because prompting is not just put an instruction, to get an outcome from the model. Prompting has to be structured. It has to be, leveraged. It has to be based on the leverage of some terms. It has to be based on some syntax, some grammar. All that matters. It's not just, write an order for the system. And that, of course, this is where it was very interesting to see which group was performing best. Sometimes it was 50-50, and that was expected from my side as well. But if I look at the overall result, I could see that, and that was, of course, one of the main lessons for also the IT organization, that some of their data scientists were certainly good, but they were not the best to actually prompt. And that's, of course, because data scientists, as I said before, they have their own experience, their own expertise in data management. But the reality is that, of course, when you are prompting, when you are, making the most of your language models, there has to be more than that. It has to be also based on language sensitivity, language effectiveness, linguistic effectiveness. So that is why, if we look at correctness, completeness, and relevance, it was not a surprise, but it was a good lesson to see that, obviously, it's not always intuitive to say that the technical teams are going to be the best ones to use language models. And these language models were indeed trained effectively with effective data. So that is another lesson. It's not always to blame the model for not generating the best outcome. that's what many people are doing. They are just saying, oh, this outcome of this generated content is not good. The model is just crap. No, that's of course a gut reaction. But obviously, if we want to find out why some generated content is not specifically good or not good enough, then of course we have to look at not just the model, but what's before the model. And what is before the model are the users of the model, because it's so easy to blame the model, of course, for any prompt engineer or prompt creator to say, oh yeah, this model is not good, let's try another one. Yeah, that's the easy, and as I said, it's the gut reaction, but it's not a real solution. Sometimes changing models is a solution, but it has to be validated by looking at how data is created, how models are trained, and also who is going to use those models. So very interesting to see that for the language industry that is sometimes under pressure from the IT industry to say, now, because of AI, we are going to be the AI owners. We're going to be the AI drivers. It's to say, well, no, of course, maybe on paper, the IT organization might be the owner of the AI strategy, but that team, the IT team, will need more than just their own experience. They will need what I call the language experience, because in language models, you have the word language. And of course, we know that, prompting is more than just writing a sentence as an instruction. It has to be well thought, well structured, and well defined. We can go to the next slide. And yeah, that's the second poll, which is regarding, again, multilingual content, multicultural content, and products. So when it comes to multilingual and multicultural content and products, how do you infuse AI? So, what is the approach that you are taking today, or that you plan to take, to infuse AI? As I said, not just implemented AI, but just to combine AI with the existing components of your ecosystem. And if your company has only one component, which might be a CMS, you might answer that question too. So the choice is, we haven't started yet infusing. We use only generative AI for a translation localization, which is what some organizations are doing. We only use generative AI for translation localization and for direct content creation, which is one step beyond translating and localizing. We use generative AI for translation localization in combination for our components in our ecosystem, TMS, NMT, CMS, it can be CRM, LMS, learning management system. So I just put here a few examples. Or we don't use AI at all for translation localization, and maybe you don't know. So let's see where you stand. Okay, so 50% goes to, we use generative AI for translation localization in components of our existing ecosystem. So TMS, that's a pretty good number. That's a pretty good number, because it means that the people who said, yes, we are using generative AI for translation localization in combination with components of our ecosystem, means that they have already used the big picture. They are not just looking at one side of the ecosystem or one part of the ecosystem. They know that it's important to leverage generative AI for more than that, for the ecosystem as it is, and find opportunities to do that in the whole ecosystem. And then, of course, there are some people using generative AI only for translation localization, which is, as I said, which is something that some organizations are doing, which is usually a good entrance to the world of AI infusion. So it's sometimes strategic choice to say, let's start using generative AI by infusing it with our translation localization components, which is good. We don't know. Okay, yeah, the other ones were good. Okay, we can go to the next and last slide, which is to answer that question that I'm getting so often. And I know it's a question which is very difficult, but it's also very far-reaching, I would say, which is balancing capabilities and capacity. Because it's not enough to say, yes, we do need to infuse generative AI in our ecosystem. It's how do we do that? What is the best way to, what is the best path to, upgrading and updating our ecosystem? Uh, like for other technologies, for AI, there is a choice between buy, partner, and build. And as I said before, I don't know so many organizations that can pretend that they can do everything on their own. They need to partner most of the time. They need partners because these partners have capabilities and or capacity that these organizations don't have. And I know even the largest multinationals now in e-commerce or in other industries, they work with external partners because they cannot do everything on their own. So this partnership option is even more relevant for companies that are a bit smaller, that are mid-size or small size. So a partnership is still there, but build shouldn't be taken off the table immediately, because obviously there might be some things, specifically if your company, if your organization has a pretty big IT team, that this IT team can build, can create on its own. But typically, of course, what I see is it's a mix. Sometimes between partnership and build, sometimes between build and buy. But it has to be balanced. That's the thing. Most of the time, I haven't seen myself, actually, when I think about it, I haven't seen organizations being able to do one of these options. So it's a balance. The question is, what should we be doing to go ahead or to go about infusing AI? It is in between those partnerships, but it has to be justified. It has to be proven. It's not enough to say we need partners. If you do that, if you put that on the table to stakeholders, they will say, oh, but why, we have a pretty big team internally, so why should we pay a partner to do things that we might be doing on our own? Well, that's when the rationale comes. Of course, as I said, in terms of capabilities, in terms of capacity, in terms of cost effectiveness, that comes to play as well. So that is my typical answer to this typical question, which is, what is the way to go to infuse AI? It's typically it ends up with a best of breed implementation. So that's important. And that's the end for me.
All right. Thanks, Bruno. This was just so good. So much great information. Also, lots of questions where we don't have a lot of time, but I think everyone's thinking about agents replacing my job. What's happening? Last week, I was in Local and I did a presentation using the World Economic Forum data that said 92 million jobs were going to be taken by AI and technology.
Mhm.
But on the flip side, 170 million new jobs would be created. So there's a net new growth in jobs. And those new jobs were going to be in AI data, in agents, and not, I'm sorry, not in agents, but in energy, because we need all this energy to run these big data systems. So we're seeing this transformation going on. So, when you talk about implementing agents, I guess what's the danger in putting agents everywhere that aren't robustly tested for quality, and where you end up getting frustrated customers and then nobody uses the agents, right?
Yeah. Well, it's a great question, and I agree with you, Kathleen. It's a big transformation that we are going through right now. Human transformation, tech in transformation. But I would say the main danger is that, of course, implementing or leveraging agents all over the place without due diligence or without rationale is that it's going to be a waste of money, first of all, because of course it costs a lot. I mean, even for simple agents, you need, of course, to create and train those agents. But in addition, to a matter of money, it's going to spoil your efforts in your company to transform the roles of the people. Because if they start seeing agents that are not appropriate, or that are appropriate but not doing a good job as an outcome, people will start saying, well, I don't believe in these agents. So, we should go back to the previous way of working, which was very manual. And as I said, going back to my example, when I said that this marketing agency had not just renamed the roles of project managers into traffic managers, but they changed the job descriptions as well, because these agents were working well. So actually the people who became, not overnight, but slowly, they became traffic managers, they had a new job description because their job was no longer pushing buttons or moving between different tools. It was actually all about orchestrating the agents and making sure that the agents were creating value for them. Because at the end of the day, those traffic managers are responsible for what agents are doing in this company. So I think there is danger also to not just to waste money, but actually to sort of create unnecessary human frustration and human disappointment, which goes beyond the money. It goes just to about how the organization is working. And of course, the outcome for clients is going to be worse than ever. So agents cannot be just sort of the silver bullet that sometimes I read about in some magazines. It has to be well balanced, and it has to be, I would say, infused in synchronization with some changing roles in the organization, if that answers your question.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've got another one here. How can language experts work closer with data scientists to develop robust multilingual language models? We know there's a gap between all English and language in, multiple language. And I saw a benchmarking presentation last week at Loke World from a large company, hyperscaler, talking about how they used benchmarking against the various LLMs and found consistently that the multilingual ones did not perform like the English only ones. So how can these teams work closer together?
Yeah, and that's, for me, it's one of my personal drive in this AI age, is actually to bridge how people work together, and to bring people together. And when I say that, I managed a few times already to bring, let's say, the tech people and the non-tech people together to make sure that generative AI was producing the expected outcome. It was to, first of all, to say that nobody is wrong or right. Data managers are the data experts. They've been working on data for years and decades sometimes, and they know how to structure data. They know how to maintain data. There is no question about that. But of course, they have to realize, when I say they, some data scientists have to realize that when it comes to generative AI, we are talking about language data. So in language data, there is the word language, and language is also in models. So it's obvious for me to demonstrate, not just to say it, but to demonstrate that if they work together with language experts, so not just multilingual experts, but people who have an expertise in language management. And Kathleen, it reminds me an old discussion that we had, I don't know, 30 years ago, when some people were saying, why should I hire a translator? My secretary is multilingual. Multilingual people are not language experts by default. Language experts have an experience, they have an expertise that most multilingual people don't have. And that's all right. That's how you discriminate the language experts from the mass of multilingual people in the world. So for me, it's important to demonstrate that if, let's say, an experienced data scientist or head of data science works with a head of language services, for instance, that the data scientist will find value not just for the organization, because eventually the language data will be much better, they will be much relevant, much more accurate, much more relevant, but for himself or herself. It's actually, if you are a head of of a data science department, you might say, yes, why should I start working, collaborating with language experts? Maybe sometimes I can ask them to validate something. But that's not the point. The point is not to ask language experts to validate. It's actually to bring language experts in the field of data management. And I know, Kathleen, to be honest, I know some language experts, translators, linguists today, they don't want to enter this new field called data management. And I think it's a missed opportunity, because for a number of linguists and translators today, or project managers today, there is a big opportunity to move, maybe not immediately in the data field, but slowly to come closer to the data field, because that's a way for them, first of all, to keep creating value, but to be also relevant in the organization and say, without my experience, my expertise in language management, there will be a number of problems that will come up later. And I think that's why this transition is not easy for a number of people, because they love translating, they love post editing sometimes. But at the end of the day, they are not specifically immediately attracted by the field of data management. And I keep being optimistic that a number of these current linguist translators, etc., will eventually find out that it's really valuable to get closer to the field of data management. And of course, that means collaborate with the data experts who are already there.
I agree with you 100%. And that's what we're seeing, this transformation with language and this convergence of language, data services, and this global content. And so I think everyone really is starting to see it. Like I said, I was at Local World last week, and the discussion was not going back to the way it used to be, but moving forward and seeing how we can use AI and data with language. So this has been great, Bruno. I've learned a lot from you. I love the real world examples. If anyone has any more questions, feel free to email Bruno. He's available to answer questions for you. And then we'll have this recording up on the website, and you'll also get a recording later. If you want to watch any of his earlier webinars, we've also got them up on the website as well. Thanks, everyone. We appreciate you joining us. Bye-bye.
Thank you.